How many four-letter words can I use on that?
Trying to switch to a double. Cheddar is driving. Nothing yet. Takedown, Michael Cheddar.
Oh, Nick, I'm a top guy, so I love top wrestling.
Hale trying to stick him. He does. Maximus Hale the fall.
So I think that wrestling is the greatest sport on earth.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into On3 Wrestling. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. With me today is American University head coach Jason Borrelli. Coach, appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to me today. Looking forward to talking to you. I know there's a lot going on in the wrestling world right now. Of course, as we turn the calendar to February 1st, I'll start out with you guys in-house. You guys are looking pretty good right now, 7-6 on the year. Of course, in your fourth season at American. Just talk to me about the progress you guys have made this year, what you're looking forward to the last month of the year before the postseason. Just the vibes over at American right now.
Well, thanks for having me on, Nick. We're in the heart of it, so it's kind of, it's go. But pretty pleased with where we are in year 4. I think we inherited a really, really young team, a team that had, 4 years ago, it had 10 true freshmen that we walked into, plus 7 kids in the other class, which were essentially true freshmen because they were a COVID year and there was no season. So 17 kids on our roster that had never wrestled a college match. And fast forward 4 years, and some of those kids are 5th years in return, and the rest of them are 4th years. So we have a lot more experience under our belt, and so pretty pleased with where we are. We've got a couple guys nationally ranked in the top 33, a handful of other guys on the bubble. And, we're being more and more competitive in dual meets. And so I feel like overall, that combined with recruiting going well has me really excited about the future. And so, there's that side of it, the wrestling, trying to get as many guys to the NCAA tournament as we can this year. But my big focus are the things directly ahead of us. This Friday, we wrestled Drexel and Lehigh on the road. And so that's where all of our focus is now. But then if you talk about programmatically, we just hired a new president at our university, a new athletic director. Both of them are in their first few months at being here. And we're in the process of getting a new facility built that will open up probably the end of this year, maybe October, November timeframe. And that new facility will have a new gym for us to compete in, a new wrestling room to practice in, a new locker room, new coaches' offices, new weight room. So really exciting times for us here at AU.
I can only imagine the stark differences that you've seen from when you took over the program as a head coach 4 years ago. Of course, you had a long time at Stanford, well-established program when you were there. Of course, a lot of success. When you look back at when you took this job initially to now, as you just alluded to, new facilities coming next fall, things are looking up. You're going to have a new practice facility, maybe a better arena for dual meets, and of course, the progress of your wrestlers themselves on the mat from freshmen to 5th-year guys. Recruiting is obviously starting to take off. What were some of the biggest challenges that you thought you faced the first year, and then how have you seen that develop over these last 4 years? I can only imagine the difference now.
Yes, well, definitely competitively in duels. That was an area where we put a lot of emphasis because I truly believe that's the number one way to build team culture and, kind of that family feel is to invest a lot in duels. You can go the tournament route, and feel like that's what's best because the NCAA tournament is a tournament. But for me, when you're trying to change culture and you're trying to change kind of just, I don't know if change is the right word, but trying to make the culture the way you want it. I feel like one of the best ways to do that is to put a heavy emphasis on duels. And so if you look at our schedule over the last three years or 4 seasons since I've been here, big emphasis on dual meets. We have 21 duels on our schedule this year. We had 21 or so last year as well. And I just think that's really big. First year I was here, we were 1-13 in duels with the schedule I kind of inherited. And that one win was a barn burner against Duke. And so to go now to be in halfway through the year and have 7 wins, be 7-6, I feel like we're getting a lot better in that realm. I think our team's as close as it's ever been since I've been here. Real good feel in terms of culture, and recruiting has gone well. So, I think we put an emphasis on that culture, changing kind of just the team camaraderie. Not to say it wasn't good, but I just want to make sure it continues to get better. And really pleased with my staff staying around. I hired Joey Dance, Alex Tirapelli, and kept Gamba Arsanja, and they've stayed with me the all 4 years. And I think that continuity is big. And so just a lot of good things happening. And, I think the future is really bright for us. And I think the biggest challenge was probably, like I mentioned before, we inherited such a young team. Most of our scholarship money has been wrapped up in those 2 classes, and they're still all in the program. And so we wanted to stick with them despite not recruiting them. I believed in, the previous staff's ability to recruit kids, and just feel like it's the right thing to do to honor this kind of scholarships that kids came in on. And so we had 17 kids that combined for most of all of our scholarship money. And so we haven't had scholarship money to recruit on until very recently. And so I think that the uptick in recruiting that's to come will be because we finally have money to recruit on. And, I get excited about that as well. So.
Talking about some of the individual success, I know you already alluded to a couple of guys that are in the rankings or just in the fringe of that top 33. So obviously that always bodes well for NCAA qualification. Will Jarrell, your heavyweight, as recently as Tuesday, he was up to number 31 at heavyweight for you guys. Talk about him and maybe some of the other guys that have really maybe impressed more than just the guys in the American room, but more so throughout the conference, throughout the country. It seems like now these guys under your watch and your staff's watch are starting to get a little bit more national recognition based on their development.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a couple guys that are redshirting that I feel like when we get them back, combined with the guys that return next year, we'll be in good shape. But yeah, Will Jarrell, he's having a good year. He's had a good year last year, but he's more consistent this year. Last year he had some big wins, but had a lot of head scratching losses. This year, he's very consistent. He's had maybe one head scratching loss that we feel, early in the season. And since then he's been very solid and consistent. Caleb Campos is kind of going through what Will went through last year, where he's had some good wins, but then some head scratching losses. He's a little bit all over the board. And once he becomes more consistent, I think, he could have a real good, end of the season. And then other guys that aren't nationally ranked, Raymond Lopez, our 133 pounder, has been, I think he's 15-6 on the year. All his losses are pretty solid. He doesn't have any like crazy bad losses. Has a couple good wins. I think he's a guy that will keep getting better as the year goes on. Our 184 pounder, sitting around 500, but had a good win this past weekend. He beat Adrian Kramer from Central Michigan, who was ranked in the top 33. So we have a handful of guys redshirting that will be exciting to get back with us next year. A kid like Max Leet and Jack Maida, both of those guys have been to the NCAA tournament previous years and are redshirting this year. And so there's a lot to be excited about. That combined with, just our young class of guys like JJ Peace and Hunter Homan. And, there's a lot of enthusiasm, at least here within our team and our program and our coaches for the future. But we also know that we could have a good postseason this year too.
When you talk about I don't know if there was necessarily challenges recruiting for you guys, or maybe if you were attacking the portal or not attacking the portals. I know you alluded to you wanted to honor the scholarships when you guys first came onto the staff. You guys took over the program 4 years ago. Has recruiting and the portal, whether you're using it or not, has that been easier now, as you alluded to, now that there's more scholarship money freed up, and the fact that maybe those outside the EIWA or maybe the casual wrestling fan is not too familiar with American University? How do you pitch it to these guys once now you've kind of opened up the door, so to speak, over the last 4 years?
Yeah, we would like to get involved in the portal a little bit. We've tried with some graduate students. I think that's where our niche will be. AU is such a good academic institution. Transferring in as an undergrad becomes a little bit tricky for a number of reasons. One, the number of credits you can bring in and where you would be, the cost associated with going here. It's very expensive private school, tuition fees, full cost of tuition, 80 some, with room and board, tuition fees, everything, $83,000 a year. And transfer students don't have access to the same financial aid as an undergraduate. So that becomes a little trickier if you're trying to transfer in as an undergrad. But I think the avenue for us would be exploring kids that have a year or two of eligibility and have finished their undergrad and are looking for a graduate degree and have some wrestling left. And we'll keep trying to push that hard where it makes sense. But it's a delicate balance, in my opinion, right? If winning kind of at all costs is your end game and what you're motivated by, I can understand that you have to be real aggressive in the portal. I want to win, but there's also something to be said for that culture and establishing relationships and being with guys for 4 or 5 years and doing it that way. I'm not naive, and I recognize that, you're going to have to go out and get some transfers, but we just want to make sure we do it the right way, because for me, this is also an educational experience, right? College athletics isn't all about just winning, right? To me, it's not just a business model. It's a lifestyle relationship, model of, doing this for the right reasons. And anytime you bring somebody new in for a year, right, you're stepping on someone else's toes that was in your family, right? And if you have people in your family and you're constantly going out and bringing others in, what are you telling the people in your family, right? And so I'm real careful of that.
I'm glad you brought that up, considering college athletics, the way it's gone in not just wrestling, but of course, football, basketball, then you name all the Olympic sports with the portal, the NIL, and then you mentioned how just recently scholarship money has opened up for you guys, and you take a more old school approach to the recruiting, but you're not, of course, naive, as you just said, to how college athletics have evolved. What do you preach to your guys, your staff, and even your administration as far as fundraising and NIL efforts, considering a lot of these kids, even when they're coming out of high school, they're like, okay, who's going to offer me X amount of dollars? And I'm not saying all kids do that, or that it's even all about that, but now it's a big contributing factor to the recruitment process. How do you approach that with prospective high school athletes, or how do you bring up those topics to your staff and administration?
Yeah, they're always going, right? We talk about NIL. I think for me, the NIL approach tends to wrap more around being able to keep the guys that we have here when others come calling, right? Obviously, there's great high school wrestlers that are going to get NIL deals and opportunities, but I look at NIL as, how do we reward and continue to keep happy and motivated the guys that are in our program? And so that's where our focus is a little bit more with NIL. But I think that it is interesting, right? If we ever want to get in the mix for top kids, those kids are going to have opportunities to make a lot of money through their name, image, and likeness. And, it's probably something we need to keep a pulse on, because we don't want to get completely left in the dust. But I still think also the type of kids I get joy out of coaching are different than the ones that are just seeking the biggest amount of money, right? To me, I love the kid who feels a little slighted, a little jaded, has a little chip on his shoulder, is doing it for different reasons and just wants to work hard and have the opportunity to compete for an NCAA title. And those are the kids that are going to do best around me, around my coaching staff, and in this environment anyway. And so, and also, I mean, listen, I've been doing it long enough to realize there are a lot of guys that float under the radar that are pretty darn good. And if you can find them, they can turn into something real special. And a lot of the kids I've coached have flown under the radar and done pretty well. I get a lot of joy out of that. So then it's, once they start doing well, how do we reward them here through NIL versus trying to find the best kid coming in, right? So
right. You talk about development a lot, and of course you spent over a decade at Stanford, and it seems like you're locked in here for the long term as well. You recently signed a contract extension with American, so it seems like you're on the same path as your wrestlers, where year one you're going to take your lumps, but you want to build something long term culturally at a prestigious school like American. When you talk about that long term aspect of your coaching with whoever's on your staff, whether it's the same guys for the next 5 years, or you have to retool your staff in a couple of years depending upon where guys go in their coaching careers. When you look at Stanford, where you were, and now American, do you see similarities where prestigious academic institution, but you're here for the slow burn, so to speak, or the long term, and really building something that's going to be long term and sustainable?
Yeah, well, I'm a pretty easygoing, easy pleasing guy, right? For me, loyalty and commitment are two pillars of what I believe and I just believe and stand for. So, when you talk about kind of loyalty, commitment, when I got the opportunity at Stanford, I had intended on being there for my whole coaching career if it worked out. Obviously, things changed, right? And so I came here, and once I was provided this opportunity and felt like it was right for me and the family, I plan on being here for as long as I can, as long as they'll have me. And I think when you show that loyalty and consistency and commitment, I think it helps kind of matriculate throughout, it kind of festers through your team and they see it. And I think that helps us keep kids here and want to be here as well. And same with the coaching staff, but the similarities, I feel like I could coach anywhere and be happy, and find success. I really believe in that. It just so happens that my first coaching opportunity was at Stanford, an elite academic school that was very prestigious. And now I'm coaching at a similar school. I don't think I was seeking that out. I think that it just happened to be where I was at the time. Right. And, kind of timing just falls, some things just fall into place. But I could very easily be coaching D3 and AIA and be somewhere else and be equally as happy and motivated and feel like I could find success. So, I don't like to chase. I don't ever look at view things as like I'm chasing the next best thing. For me, I try to make what I have now the best thing, and that's all I focus on.
That's good perspective. And in speaking of just the wrestling programs throughout the country in the general sense, of course, a lot of news came out recently. Cleveland State announced they're going to be cutting the program along with 2 other sports at the school. You went through a similar situation over at Stanford, and of course, they ended up resurrecting wrestling in addition to, I believe it was about 15 or 16 other programs at the school. Following that year, when you look at, I guess you're a little bit more removed from it now, basically a full recruiting class from 2021 from your last season at Stanford. When you look back on that, the way, Shane Griffith was able to win that national title, essentially save the program and the rest of them at Stanford. You see similar situations now with smaller schools cutting programs, other schools even adding programs. It's kind of just going back and forth. A lot of uncertainty in college athletics. When you look back at now, maybe you're enough removed from it now. Can you measure the impact that scenario had on Stanford back in 2021? And do you think other schools that maybe are going to go in similar situations, can they have similar impacts where they save their programs and eventually maybe add programs down the line at other schools?
Well, yes, I can reflect back on it. I think, it's the greatest joy that I've had professionally. And maybe not even professionally, just in my personal life, being a part of helping keep that program and 11 sports in total, right? That they saved. I recognize the role I played and others played, and it was large, but it's not one person. Shane played a huge part. Our alumni at Stanford played a huge part, and my assistant coaches, Ray Blake, Alex. So many people, right? The parents. There was just a lot of things. Can you replicate that? I'm not sure. We had we caught a lot of breaks, right? And when that happened, particularly we had a season, and so that's 10 months to develop a plan and rally troops and, try to cut into things that were happening. So time was on our side. And when you don't have time on your side, that changes a lot. We also had, some very, very, very key people involved, some alumni, just a lot of connections, which you don't always have and you can't always develop in a short period of time. But we also happen to have Shane, who was having a great year, and Jaden Abbas was an All-American as a freshman, and we had Real Woods on that team. So we had a lot of things that brought a lot of attention. That being said, what you can replicate is the efforts that we put in, right? I know that from the second we heard the news, my mind, my coaching staff's mind, and ultimately my team's mind was that we are going to get this overturned. And when you have that amount of positivity, it creates and passion for overturning something, that is really important, right? And I truly believe there was a way, right? And so then it was, let's figure this out. And it's full steam ahead. And I woke up every single day, every day thinking, hey, what do we need to do to help overturn this decision? And just went to work every day doing stuff. And so it was COVID. It was 2021. So right. You're not worried, as you don't have as much travel going on for the season. The timing of it much different than Cleveland State's, right? Coach Moore, Josh is in a much different situation. Announcement comes out in late January, season ends in 2 months. He's in the grind. It's going to be harder to fight, which is why I reached out to him and just said, hey, is there anything we can do? I can do to help, be a resource or, whatever, because he's going to need a lot of help just because of the timing.
Do you think, and maybe it's more of a loaded question and there probably isn't a simple answer to this, and, people can blame the way the revenue sharing is coming down later this year and across college athletics. Maybe it's because wrestling is still an Olympic sport like a lot of other sports, but you're not going to really see football or basketball traditionally get cut from the school when they're talking about reducing an athletic budget. Every school is different. What can you say out loud to Coach Moore and Cleveland State and maybe other programs that could be on the chopping block in the future or have been on the chopping block before, what is the go-to maybe first plan of attack, even at this late in the game where, as you said, 2 months to go in the season to try to save a program or to try to start these efforts? What's the first thing that you would do in his situation?
Well, I think the first thing is you got to tell the president, the decision makers, the board of trustees, and the athletic director that this isn't going to solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
If it's truly financial and they're worried about the bleak financial picture, cutting the wrestling program is not the answer. There are better ways to look at financial savings. There's other things you can do. People that are in the world of college athletics, we're starting to lose sight of what the intention was. And more student athletes, more opportunities is better, right? It's a platform. It's a leadership platform. It's a place for kids to chase dreams, stay motivated, get an education, sometimes some of it paid for that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And so we're losing sight of that. The mismanagement, misspending, overspending, it's really disgusting at the college level. I've seen it, I've seen it firsthand at my previous institution, just where the money's going. And we've just completely we've lost all perspective. We've now, even as fans, feel like, oh, it's all business. It's all who's bringing in the money. When in reality, maybe 20 Division I athletic departments, 25, I would say, are turning a profit on their athletic departments because of football. The rest of them are it's a money pit, right? They're sinking it in. And so we just need to relook at what we're doing. Yeah. And so I would remind the decision makers of that, right? Cutting a wrestling program with 2 to 3 scholarships with a minimal operating budget is not solving your financial problem. So, and then I would say, if there's I would ask them, what is a path? What could we do, right? What could we do to help with the issues, right? Is it 0 scholarships and reduce our budgets and take pay cuts? Like, is there something we could all do? Because for the short term, because obviously this is short term, because long term this isn't helping. This isn't going to do much. And so I think some of these decision makers get real short sighted and they think, well, I just got to save money right now to get through the year. But it's like, it's really not solving your problem, right? And that would be my start. The next start would be for Coach Moore, and I think he knows this, is finding people that can help, because when you're in the fire and he's got all these other things going on, and he's got to worry about getting his guys ready and just competing every weekend, you're going to need a lot of help. And so that was one thing me and my staff recognized right away, is when we went into this, is we need some people that can help take charge and do some things, because otherwise all the athletes' experiences are going to suffer for the next 2 months, and you don't want that. Right. So those are the things I would do. And I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's where I would start.
Yeah, I think at least just getting the word out and getting maybe the bigger names talking about it. I know Stipe Miocic finally broke his silence the other day. He's a Cleveland State alum, wrestled for that program. Of course, being a UFC champion, I'm sure he had his name carries a lot more weight. So maybe something like that, where maybe these famous alumni, as you mentioned, that could be a start to helping out. With changes to wrestling, I know there's been a big conversation about, how to keep growing this sport, what's next, what can take the sport to the next level. So maybe you avoid situations like this, or you keep up essentially with some of the other Olympic sports that have kind of broken, they've broken out, so to speak, over the last few years. I mentioned, women's volleyball, women's basketball, not an Olympic sport, but they took a huge step up over the last couple of years. Of course, you look at gymnastics as well. When you talk about what can be done next for the sport, you're a big dual meet guy, I could tell. I've been, singing this, doing this song and dance for the last year, 2 years at this point with a dual meet championship. When you look at what can be next for the sport, what's good for the sport, how do you envision wrestling growing as a whole, especially in the team aspect?
Yeah, I mean, no secret. Ever since my time on the NCAA committee, which was 2012 through 2016, I've felt like dual meets are the way to grow the sport. You think, we have tournaments all the time, but the attendance at tournaments is never very high, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 a year. Dual meets, we get, 5 to 15,000 people at dual meets quite often throughout the year. And so I think the proof is there that people will go sit and watch a 2-hour dual meet instead of a, 8-hour tournament. Right. And I just feel like the average American sports fan They like to watch things for about 2 hours, and they understand a team versus team. They can get excited about a team and the superstars on the team, but it's really hard. It's very rare that, that an individual sport or individual marketed like event, other than maybe the UFC, they've done well with it. And that's maybe the one example, but it's just harder. And I just feel like if we want to grow, we need 2-hour events that are a team versus team, so that somebody can just start picking a side and just cheer for that team, right? For whatever reason, whatever school. So I really believe the dual meet is big. I also think what I don't like about, well, I like it, but I just feel like we need to be careful of how we project the sport of wrestling. This notion that it's an individual sport and you got to be selfish, to me, that's a disaster. Because, when you promote selfishness, I don't think it ever helps, right? And so I think we need our athletes, our parents, all our little kids coming up through the sport and being involved in duels and being on a team, and the focus not being individual. Because when you make it individual, you can't help but be selfish. And I don't know about you, but I don't like to be around selfish people. I would never marry a selfish person. I would never recruit a selfish person. I would never hire a selfish person. And so this idea that you have to be selfish and individualized in wrestling is crazy. And I hear people talk about it all the time. And I think if we start marketing dual meets and we make the youth wrestling more duels and more team versus team, it will take away that idea of like, it's all about me and shop myself around to the best club because it's me, 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 me. And we will help grow our sport. And I don't think we recognize what we're doing when we market the sport as all individual and you have to be selfish, and we take pride in that. And I hear people say that, and I'm like, you can be focused, right? Having an athlete that's very focused is a lot different than having an athlete that's very selfish, right? And I don't know, that's just really big for me. And then I would also say, to grow the sport, we need to ask the question, if we were going to a panel, we had 100 parents in a room that knew nothing about wrestling. What things would we want to market to them that would cause them to want to get their kid to try wrestling, right? And I think you have to answer questions like safety, right? And we have this idea, people talk about getting rid of the headgear, and we shouldn't have a headgear. Well, if you wear the headgear the right way and you fit it the right way, it prevents cauliflower ear. And I think every parent would look at a 10-year-old with cauliflower ear and without it and hope that their kid doesn't have it. And so I feel like, why are we acting like we can't have the headgear? If we don't model that at the college level, no little kid's going to want to do it. And then kids are going to be all banged up and parents aren't going to want their kids involved. I think about the singlet. A lot of young kids have body issue images, and a lot of kids just don't feel comfortable wearing a singlet when they're little. Not all, but some. And a lot of parents don't want to get ridiculed or have their kids teased because they're wearing a onesie or a leotard or whatever they call it, because they don't know it's a singlet. And so I think like maybe we need to revamp our uniform a little bit. I think, just, a lot of these things, ask the question, somebody who's never wrestled or is not familiar with the sport, what would they want to get their kid involved in it? And we need to answer and address those issues at the youth level, but we have to model them at the highest level. Otherwise, we'll never get buy-in from the youth. And I don't think we do enough of that, right? We ask within our wrestling community, people who love wrestling, what we should do. We're all embedded in it. We love it. And, I'm okay with the singlet. I'm okay with not a headgear because I don't care. But in reality, those things matter when you're first getting involved, right? And so, those are some things I think about when it comes to growing the sport.
I like that perspective a lot, considering you mentioned, talk to the parents and the kids that have never done it or maybe did it once, and they have a lot of uncertainty about the sport. And especially when you get them young, you can get them into the sport earlier and often, and then preach that team aspect. So I can only imagine what you're doing at American right now. Going back to what you said about the new facility coming, and of course, a new place for you guys to wrestle, a new place for you guys to practice as well. What have you guys done personally as a program, especially, going from year 1 now to year 4, to really market the dual meet, to market the team aspect? What do you say to your current student body and those who are maybe thinking about becoming an American University wrestling fan, and maybe they want to come to a dual meet? How do you market that to them?
Yeah, awesome question. And it's something that drives me every day, is to enhance our dual meet experience, win or lose. My kids I have 3 boys. I have an 11, a 10, and a 6-year-old, and we go to a lot of sporting events. And, both areas that they've grown up in, whether it was Northern California or here, have a lot of professional sports and college sports teams around. And I take the kids to a lot of stuff. And one thing that's generally true is win or lose, whichever team they want to root for when we go to that event, the kids have a pretty good time when they're at the event, and they don't really leave and talk about the team that lost or the team that they cheered for and they didn't do well. They remember the experiences, right? They remember the music that was played, the games that were offered, the video board things that are happening to keep them engaged, the giveaways, whatever. So for us, we throw t-shirts out we call them takedown tees. We'll throw t-shirts into the crowd to the rowdiest sections. During dual meets, we have the smoke and the tunnel for the guys to run out of. And none of that was here when I first got here. We dim the lights for intros, and we have an intro, little video that hypes the crowd, play music during the event, have a DJ, but we've been doing all that. We started a beer garden, just things to try to make the fans enjoy the 2 hours and want to come back regardless if we win or lose. And I think, that's really important. And I think having giveaways, right, to get students to come, iPhone giveaways and concert ticket giveaways and things like that, just so there's positive talk about going to the wrestling match. And oftentimes people forget about the outcome, but it's a bonus if you do really well, because then they really will want to come back. So that's important to me. And that's another reason why I feel like the dual meet matters so much, is that it's the experience. We have the cardboard cutout with the guy flexing, and the little kids can put their face in there and feel like the AU wrestler, and then take that picture home, put it on their wall, put it on their refrigerator, and always think about being at the AU wrestling meet. And so those things matter. And I know that because I have young boys who go to a lot of sporting events, and it's all about the memories they create, not the actual event that happens, right?
I like it. Yeah, it's a great experience. And speaking of that, because we mentioned the dual meet, and I know over the last couple of weeks, and I know Oklahoma State coach David Taylor kind of set Twitter ablaze about, talking about the national duels and whatnot. They never really went away, but now they seem to be coming back in full force, a little bit revamped, starting next November. They're going to be out in Tulsa. It's a 16-team invite. Not everybody has been committed. Some teams have committed to, wanting an invite. It's an invitational for the top 16, however they figure out the top 16 at that point. What do you make of that? I know, for me personally, a dual meet championship is the way to go, and not in November. However you figure it out, make it happen. But this to me is a nice first step, considering the financial incentive as well for the teams that do get invited and the ones that end up winning it. What was your first reaction to this revamped national duels coming in November?
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I mean, conceptually, I think it's great. You start to get an event that, not only will draw top teams, but there's money to help support teams. So I think conceptually it's good. And I think getting it off the ground is always a good thing, because you can move the date, you can tweak those things down the road and figure out how to invite the right teams. And, so I think there's nothing really negative that comes from it. It's something that's been talked about for quite a while, and I feel like it's needed. And I'm glad that David and, some people that are really invested in the sport growing are, kind of putting some money behind, the ideas that we've had for a long time. I don't know where we'll go from here, but I certainly feel like it's a good start, and I think only probably positives can come from it.
A couple more for you, Coach. Again, appreciate your time. Jason Borrelli with me here on On3 Wrestling. You look at the rules that have been applied to wrestling, some of the rule changes that have been instituted the last couple of years. Of course, notably was the 3-point takedown the other year, and how near fall has changed as well. I saw you on Twitter the other day, talking about maybe an 11th weight class. Now, I wrestled in club in college, not very well, albeit, but but the NCAA had an 11th weight class. It was at 235 pounds. I've seen arguments for both sides. What to you is the biggest argument to add an 11th weight class? Does that make wrestling better from a dual meet / tournament perspective? What do you make of that? And are there any other big rule changes that you would institute pretty much right away?
Yeah, I think the big benefit from it is there's a lot of things that come to mind for me. Yes, I think it helps the dual meet. I mean, team that wins 6 matches always wins if it's tied, right? So that's neat, but that's not the biggest. For me, you go deeper into your roster. So if you have 11 guys competing, I don't see why that would be bad, right? We roster 30 guys, and some schools roster 40 some guys. some maybe as low as 22, 23, whatever. But the more guys that get to participate, the better experience it is for them. The argument can be made, interestingly, that, oh, well, this means the big programs have an advantage because it's another superstar that they get out there. But I actually feel differently. I feel like it creates more parity for a number of reasons. When you have more weights, there's more variables and more things changing each dual meet in terms of like injuries or depth, who your depth is if you have a second string in. I believe top programs become more vulnerable in dual meets than tournaments. Absolutely. Because the tournament setting is all about, you could have 4 or 5 superstars. And, the dual meet is always, you have to have quality guys at every weight and some depth, because you never know when your depth guy, your second, third string has to wrestle for you. And so I think the more people that have to participate on your roster, the more parity it creates. And I think it's going to further be like that if we go to this change where Power 4 programs, Power 5 programs only get 30 guys on their roster, but schools like Gardner-Webb, Bloomsburg, schools that aren't opting in can have 45. Well, their ability to have quality depth at 11 weights is better than the team with only 30 guys on their roster. And so I like the idea of expanding it to an 11th weight. I don't really know where you add it. I've not thought about whether it's the 220-ish or if it's like bring the 125 up to reconfigure all the weights. I don't know, but I really like the idea of getting more guys on your roster an opportunity to compete. I don't think that's a bad thing. We already roster that many guys. Mm-hmm. We might as well get more guys an opportunity to wrestle, because one thing that is really hard for our job to begin with is if I roster 30 guys and only 10 can ever start. 66% of my team, is never happy, or 60 or whatever it is. Only a third of your team is the starters and are ever really happy. You always, I don't think that's a great, it's a great thing for coaching. You want to go deep into your roster so that they have a meaningful experience. So, that's part of the reason I just kind of brought that up as an idea. Mm-hmm. So that's one for the 11th weight. Other things that I think need to change. I don't know. I don't know how, I don't know what to do about the stalling and the step out. Mm-hmm. I'm torn there just because I like the fact that you can wrestle out of bounds and still score, where now if you give a point every time someone steps out, wrestling dies at the edge of the mat. And so you don't get the foot in takedown, the foot in near fall, because if someone went out of bounds, they just award the point, I guess. Right. I'm not sure how I feel on that. What other things have come up? Use of saunas. I've heard that forever. I'm not sure that we'll ever get there. The competitive safeguards just probably won't let us get to that, but maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. I don't know. So I don't know. Do you have other ideas that
I believe I saw your timing thing where you take away the 3-minute first period and just go back to 2-2-2, still how it is at the high school level.
Yeah. I proposed that. I love the 7-minute match, right? I benefited from it in college. I was an endurance wrestler, so I liked it. It was good on top, so, but I also wrestled in tournaments in college that were 2-2-2 at the time. And I don't think it diminished the product. I don't think when I go watch a high school kid, a 2-2-2 match diminishes it that much. It actually might enhance it, because if you don't have to quite be in as good a shape, or train quite as hard, maybe the wear and tear on your body isn't as bad and people stay healthier and more people are involved in the sport, right? If I don't have to, if I don't have to do all the things I do to it gets exponentially harder. The 6 to 7 minutes is a lot different cardiovascularly in a match, and you have to train a little bit different, and that creates wear and tear, chance for injury, burnout, all those things. And so maybe it helps, but I don't know.
I do like that perspective. I would love to see data on it. If you saw the wear and tear comparisons between a guy who wrestled a whole season with 7-minute matches where, he went 7 minutes the entire time or in every single match, compared to somebody who went 6 minutes an entire time. I think that'd be a really interesting case study. And who knows, maybe they revisit it. I don't see that personally. I don't see that rule changing anytime soon, but that is an interesting thought. And, but I'll leave you here with this one. We'll circle back to American, because you mentioned Drexel and Lehigh coming up on Friday, a couple more matches for you on the docket. I don't know if your messaging changes at this point in the season. And for those who are pretty much unaware of how how a grind of a wrestling season goes from November, and you get to this point, late January, early February, where now you're a month plus or minus away from the conference tournaments. What do you tell your guys at this stage of the game where, okay, we have X amount of duels left, but we have the conference tournaments coming up. We want to get guys to NCAAs. We want guys on the podium, et cetera, et cetera. What do you tell these guys ahead of these duels coming up as compared to maybe when you guys open the season?
Well, you remind them that they're getting fewer and fewer opportunities, so they've got to make the most of them, right? And as you get closer and closer to the postseason, even though you might be going into a duel with Penn State, this isn't a good example because they consistently wrestle their best guys. But you see this some, like you get into toward the end of the year and we think we're going to get a real good opportunity to beat a guy who's ranked like 25th in the country, but he doesn't wrestle in the dual meet because there's no benefit for them to wrestle us and possibly get beat, right? And so this is about getting to the point where when we wrestle some of these next couple weeks, these better teams that have nationally ranked guys, this might be your last chance to knock somebody off and establish yourself in the rankings. And so, just reminding guys of that, that, hey, you're trained for the big moments. And so as we go into these duels against Lehigh, Drexel, Penn State, whoever it might be on the stretch, and you get your chance against a nationally ranked guy, got to make the most of it because you might not get any more. And so I think that's a good reminder because when it's November, you think, I got the whole season. I got a lot of opportunities. I got the Southern Scuffle. I got this tournament, that and that. But now you don't. And so you get that chance. You got to make the most of it.
I like hearing that. Jason Borrelli with me here on On3 Wrestling. American University takes on Drexel and Lehigh on Friday. Coach, appreciate your time today. Good luck the rest of the way. Hope I see you out in Philly for NCAAs.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Nick.
Absolutely. On3 Wrestling, be sure to like and subscribe to this video, subscribe to the channel, check out our content at on3.com, and, of course, follow us on all social channels and follow me on Twitter as well. On3 Wrestling. We'll see you next time.